Heath Ledger. When Christopher Nolan announced his pick for the Joker in 2006, the comic book internet went into open revolt, and the guy he'd chosen was best known for an Oscar-nominated romance and a teen rom-com. The casting hit on July 31st of that year, naming Ledger as the villain in The Dark Knight, the sequel to Batman Begins. Fans pictured him as the brooding cowboy from Brokeback Mountain, or the love-struck teenager from 10 Things I Hate About You, and the message boards filled with comments like, "Worst casting decision ever made," and "Are you kidding me?" Nolan's brother and co-writer Jonathan Nolan later recalled the fan community pilloried his brother over the choice, with people flatly saying they didn't see it. Christopher Nolan refused to back down, telling interviewers it was a question of not giving the fans what they wanted. Then, Ledger disappeared. He reportedly locked himself in a London hotel room for about a month, kept a journal as the character, and built the performance from the inside out. On January 22nd of 2008, 6 months before release, Ledger died of an accidental cardiac arrest from prescription medication. When The Dark Knight opened that July, it grossed over $1 billion worldwide, and held Rotten Tomatoes scores in the mid-90s for years. In 2009, Ledger won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, the first Oscar ever given to a comic book performance, and one of only a small handful awarded posthumously. The fans who'd protested now rank his Joker at or near the top of every best villain list ever compiled. Robert Pattinson. The internet hadn't forgiven the Twilight movies, and the moment Matt Reeves announced his Bruce Wayne, the petitions started flying within hours. The casting hit the trades on May 16th of 2019. Within 24 hours, multiple Change.org petitions launched, and one gathered over 6,800 signatures. The complaint was uniform, that he was just the Twilight guy, and the protest carefully ignored every post-Twilight credit he'd built up with directors like Robert Eggers, the Safdie brothers, Claire Denis, and David Cronenberg. The Batman arrived on March 4th of 2022, opened to an 85% Rotten Tomatoes score, and grossed about $772 million worldwide. As Reeves pointed out, no actor has ever been announced as Batman without backlash, a tradition stretching back to 1989. Renée Zellweger. Picking an American actress to play Britain's most relatable singleton sparked the loudest casting outrage the UK press had managed since 1939. In 2000, Zellweger was cast as the lead in Bridget Jones's Diary, the adaptation of Helen Fielding's British comic novel. She'd beaten out Helena Bonham Carter, Emily Watson, Rachel Weisz, Kate Winslet, Kate Blanchett, and Toni Collette during a roughly 2-year search. The British press did not take it well. An Evening Standard columnist called it clunking, Hollywood idiocy. One headline ran, "Crap American comedian playing British icon." The coverage was openly compared to the 1939 outrage over Vivien Leigh being handed the role of Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. Zellweger relocated to London for about 3 months, worked daily with a dialect coach, and went undercover at a London publishing house to study office speech patterns. Co-star Hugh Grant publicly defended her casting before release. The film opened on April 13th of 2001, grossing roughly $282 million worldwide on a $25 million budget. Zellweger landed her first Academy Award nomination for the role, plus a BAFTA nomination from the same UK industry that had mocked her hiring, the closest thing to an apology those gatekeepers ever wrote down. Ben Affleck. Within an hour of Warner Bros. Announcing the new Batman in August of 2013, Twitter had filed roughly 96,000 reactions, and 7 out of 10 of them were furious. The casting dropped on August 22nd of that year, naming Affleck as Bruce Wayne in Zack Snyder's Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Social tracking firm Physiology pegged the negative share at around 71%, a number Variety and The Hollywood Reporter ran widely. Within 24 hours, more than 30 separate Change.org petitions had appeared, and the largest gathered tens of thousands of signatures, asking Warner Bros. To remove him. The dominant complaint was that his 2003 Daredevil performance disqualified him from another superhero role. Affleck addressed the backlash years later on The Howard Stern Show, plainly saying he was hurt, even though he'd won Best Picture for Argo only months before the announcement. Batman v Superman arrived on March 25th of 2016. Reviews were split. But even reviewers who hated the film singled out Affleck's Bruce Wayne and Batman as a strong point. He returned for Justice League in 2017, the Snyder Cut in 2021, and The Flash in 2023, and across every one of those releases, his casting kept getting reaffirmed, even when the films around him didn't. By the way, if you're enjoying this so far, I post videos like this regularly, and a subscribe really helps the channel out. Thanks. Anne Hathaway. A pre-existing online resentment had a name, Hathahate, and the moment she suited up as Selina Kyle, fans opened fire. She was cast in January of 2011 for The Dark Knight Rises, the third Christopher Nolan Batman film. The backlash sat on top of a broader anti-Hathaway moment online, intensified after she'd co-hosted the 2011 Academy Awards with James Franco. Many fans argued she didn't fit the fantasy of Selina Kyle, and message boards spent months campaigning for anyone else. The Dark Knight Rises opened on July 20th of 2012, grossing over $1.08 billion worldwide, and reviews routinely cited Hathaway's Catwoman as one of the most assured elements of the film. The reversal was really about an entire online persona, and the role helped reset her public image. Michael Keaton. Long before email forwards or comment sections, comic book fans organized a paper revolt, and 50,000 letters were dragged across mailroom floors at Warner Brothers. Keaton was cast in 1988 as Bruce Wayne in Tim Burton's Batman. The Wall Street Journal documented at the time that roughly 50,000 protest letters had landed at the studio from comic book fans. The objection was familiar. Keaton was best known for Beetlejuice in 1988 and the comedy Mr. Mom from 1983. And at roughly 5'10" with a receding hairline, fans considered him physically wrong for a square-jawed Batman. Tim Burton publicly defended the choice, telling reporters that Michael Keaton was basically an ordinary guy, a regular human being, and that taking someone like that and making him into Batman was a more interesting idea. Screenwriter Sam Hamm also defended the casting publicly. Batman opened on June 23rd of 1989, grossed over $411 million worldwide on a $35 million budget, and ended the year as the highest-grossing film of 1989. Keaton returned in Batman Returns in 1992 and reprised the role over 30 years later in The Flash in 2023, where audiences treated his return as a generational event. Every casting backlash that followed was unconsciously copying the Keaton playbook. Daniel Craig. Pierce Brosnan was out, the producers picked his replacement, and the British tabloids ran a single mocking headline on repeat. The name's Bland. James Bland. The casting was announced on October 14th of 2005, naming Craig as the new James Bond in Casino Royale, the franchise's full reboot after Brosnan was let go following Die Another Day in 2002. Backlash centered on Craig's blonde hair, blue eyes, and roughly 5'10" height. Fans argued the character had always been dark-haired, and the London Daily Mirror ran the now famous James Bland headline that month. A protest website, DanielCraigIsNotBond.com, organized a boycott pledge, and a press story about Craig accidentally cutting his lip during a fight scene was used by the tabloids to suggest he wasn't physical enough for the role. Craig later said that, of course he was bothered by it. Producer Barbara Broccoli pushed back publicly, pointing out that Roger Moore, Bond from 1973 to 1985, was also blonde, and calling the hair complaint baffling. Craig refused to dye his hair for the role. Casino Royale arrived in November of 2006, grossed about $616 million worldwide, and earned the strongest critical reviews any Bond film had received in decades. Craig played Bond across 5 films from 2006 to 2021, totaling around $3.1 billion in worldwide box office. He was made a Companion of the Order of St. Michael and St. George in the 2022 New Year Honors, an honor shared with the fictional Bond. The same outlets that had called him James Bland later called him the definitive Bond of the modern era. Chris Evans. Marvel had already used him as the Human Torch, and now the studio wanted audiences to forget that and accept him as the most patriotic superhero in the catalog. He was cast in March of 2010 as Steve Rogers in Captain America: The First Avenger, and skeptics doubted one actor could front 2 Marvel franchises after his Johnny Storm in Fox's Fantastic Four films. Evans initially turned down the multi-film offer and consulted Robert Downey Jr., who encouraged him to take the role. The first Avenger opened on July 22nd of 2011, pulling in roughly $65 million domestically, and reviews singled out Evans's earnest, sincere take as a real surprise. He played Captain America across 10 MCU films through Avengers Endgame, turning a recasting risk into one of the most committed superhero performances of the era. Bryan Cranston. AMC executives took one look at the goofy dad from Malcolm in the Middle and asked if there was anyone else. In 2007, he was cast as Walter White in AMC's Breaking Bad, a sitcom dad pitched to lead a Vince Gilligan prestige drama about a chemistry teacher turned meth manufacturer. Gilligan had directed Cranston in a 1998 episode of The X-Files titled Drive, and he pushed for him from the start. AMC executives were resistant, questioning whether the actor, known for shaving his entire body in a comedy episode of Malcolm in the Middle, could really carry a serious cancer-stricken anti-hero. John Cusack and Matthew Broderick were reportedly considered, and both passed. Breaking Bad premiered on January 20th of 2008, ran for 5 seasons, and is widely cited as one of the greatest television series ever produced. Cranston won the Primetime Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Drama Series 4 times for the role, in 2008, 2009, 2010, and 2014. The first 3 were consecutive wins, a feat previously accomplished only by Bill Cosby. The rare casting reversal that happened in the executive room before it ever reached the audience. Jennifer Lawrence. The book's heroine was 16 years old, blonde disguised, and described as starvation thin, and the studio cast a 20-year-old Oscar nominee. She was announced on March 16th of 2011 as Katniss Everdeen in The Hunger Games, based on Suzanne Collins' novel. Backlash centered on her age and her appearance, with online critics at the time calling her too womanly, or wrong-bodied, for a starving district girl. Collins and director Gary Ross publicly defended the casting, and Collins reportedly worried more about casting the character too young than too old. The Hunger Games arrived on March 23rd of 2012, grossing about $695 million worldwide, and Lawrence reprised the role in 3 sequels through 2015, a cautionary tale about source material purism, with the author herself dismissing the complaint before the cameras rolled. Gal Gadot. When Warner Brothers announced their Wonder Woman in late 2013, the loudest objection had nothing to do with acting, and everything to do with a tape measure. She was cast on December 4th of that year as Diana Prince in Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice, with a multi-film deal that included a solo Wonder Woman film. Backlash centered on her physique, with tweets at the time targeting her frame, plus complaints about her Israeli accent and her thin filmography. One online critic compared her unfavorably to Linda Carter, the 1970s television Wonder Woman, and others argued she didn't have what they called Amazonian proportions. Gadot publicly responded, noting that historically, the Amazons were sometimes depicted with 1 breast, not 2, and that critics calling her too thin were missing the muscle gains still to come. She reportedly added around 17 pounds of muscle for the role. Her brief Wonder Woman appearance in Batman vs. Superman was widely cited as a highlight in otherwise mixed reviews. Wonder Woman itself arrived on June 2nd of 2017, grossed about $824 million worldwide, earned a 93% Rotten Tomatoes score, and became the highest-grossing live-action film by a female director, Patty Jenkins. The post-release reception left almost no one defending the original objections. Tom Cruise. The author of the book itself walked the casting all over town, comparing him to a child actor and an old gangster, and then she paid for an 8-page newspaper ad to take it all back. He was cast in 1993 as Lestat de Lioncourt in Interview with the Vampire, directed by Neil Jordan from Anne Rice's 1976 novel, with producer David Geffen making the call. Rice publicly objected to the LA Times, comparing Cruise and co-star Brad Pitt to Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer, and saying Cruise was no more her vampire Lestat than Edward G. Robinson was Rhett Butler, a reference to the diminutive 1930s gangster film actor. Interview with the Vampire opened on November 11th of 1994. After seeing the finished film, Rice publicly reversed her position. She bought an 8-page advertisement in Daily Variety praising the film, comparing Cruise to Errol Flynn and Rudolph Valentino, and writing that she liked to believe Tom's Lestat would be remembered the way Olivier's Hamlet is remembered, that others might play the role someday, but no one would ever forget Tom's version of it. She also reportedly telephoned Cruise to apologize. The film grossed roughly $224 million worldwide on a $60 million budget. The cleanest documented "I was wrong" arc in casting history, with the source novelist publicly buying ad space to recant. Robert Downey Jr. Marvel's board of directors thought their president was crazy. They wanted Timothy Olyphant. He wanted a recovered drug addict who couldn't get insured. The casting was announced on September 29th of 2006, naming Downey as Tony Stark in Iron Man, the first film of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Downey's career had been derailed by substance-related arrests, starting with a 1996 incident in Los Angeles. He was dismissed from Ally McBeal in 2001 after further arrests, and he has stated publicly he's been sober since 2003. Studios refused to insure him for years, and Mel Gibson personally underwrote Downey's liability insurance for The Singing Detective in 2003, so he could keep working. Marvel Studios president David Mizell later told Variety the board thought he was crazy to put the future of the company in the hands of an addict, with Timothy Olyphant as their preferred alternative. Director Jon Favreau pushed hard for Downey, telling Marvel he understood Tony Stark from his own life experience, and a screen test closed it, where Downey delivered Stark's voice essentially fully formed. Iron Man opened on May 2nd of 2008, grossed about $585 million worldwide on a $140 million budget, and earned a 94% Rotten Tomatoes score. Downey played Tony Stark across 10 MCU films through 2019, reportedly earning over $400 million in compensation, ending with Avengers Endgame and its roughly $2.79 billion worldwide gross. The character's final line, "I am Iron Man," is the closing image of the entire Infinity Saga. In 2024, Downey won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for Oppenheimer. The same industry that had refused to insure him 20 years earlier was the one handing him the statue. If this was worth your time, consider subscribing so you catch every new video. Thanks for watching.